everyone from the, so everyone's joined from the waiting room now, and I think we're just going to jump into the session in order to stick to the tight schedule that we've laid out for this session. So welcome everybody to this session on partnerships in green finance initiatives for agri-SMEs. My name is Michael Van During. I'm the technical specialist for the Secretariat of the Smallholder and Agri-SME Finance and Investment Network, which is housed at the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD, in Rome. So just a few quick words on housekeeping rules here for this session. Essentially, because we're going to be having a discussion, no presentations for the next 30 minutes or so. We'll ask everyone to make sure that they keep their microphones muted. We will, following that discussion, have a Q&A, and we therefore invite anyone who has questions to ask to put them in the chat. I believe we'll also be able to take audio questions at that time as well, but we'll be trying to go through the list, through the full list of questions put in the chat. So I am leading for the SAFIN network this learning agenda, which focuses on trying to put forward and discuss and exchange, share knowledge on a number of different themes that are highlighted by our partners, one of which is green finance for agriculture SMEs. In this particular session, we'll be building on that particular theme with a real focus on partnerships in this area. And so in order to do that, we're going to be having a discussion with two prominent figures in this area in India. And the discussion was going to be moderated by Kisa Mfalila, who is the lead environment and climate specialist for the Asia and the Pacific region with IFAD. And she will be speaking to Arindom Datta, who is the executive director and head of rural development, banking and advisory at Rabobank, which is a global leader in food and agriculture financing and sustainably oriented banking, where he's worked for the last 15 years. She will also be speaking to Anil Kumar, who's the founder and CEO of Samunnati, which aims to build an open agri-network for farmers with a mission to make markets work for smallholder farmers through the provision of customized financial solutions and market linkages. So without further ado, I will pass the microphone on to Kisa and her two guests. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, from wherever you are joining us today. Thank you very much for joining us and welcome to what promises to be a very exciting and informative fire chat between two prominent players in the space of agricultural, small and medium enterprises in India, Rabobank and Samunnati. The key questions that we will be discussing today are the why and the how of establishing robust partnerships that can effectively deliver green finance to agricultural small and medium enterprises. I will define green finance within the context of this partnership between Rabobank and Samunnati. What is green financing? These are financial investment flows that are targeting small and medium enterprises in India that are working in the space or the sector of sustainable landscape. The key aim is to promote agricultural practices that are leading toward low carbon emissions by either preserving or restoring forest land, and also to encourage agricultural practices that are reducing greenhouse gas emissions or are increasing carbon sequestration. That whole structure or deal is facilitated also by the engagement with the United States Agency for International Development, USAID in India. So without further ado, I will ask Arindom from Rabobank to let us know what were the circumstances that influenced Rabobank's decision to seek partnerships as a preferred vehicle for delivering green financing to agricultural small and medium enterprises in India. Arindom, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Kisa. Thank you, Safin, for inviting me for this chat. And Kisa, to answer your question, as Michael mentioned, Rabobank is the global leader in food and agribusiness, and also on ESG parameters, it's been rated and ranked #1 by Sustainalytics. And third is it's a cooperative bank. So cooperative principles are enshrined in the mission of the bank. Because of being a global leader in food and agribusiness, it's our mandate to widen and deepen the agriculture footprint of the bank. And being a ESG leader also, we do have the ambition of being the leader in climate financing in the world. Now, how the partnership came into being, well, we already had a partnership with Samunnati that was on FPO financing. It was more of inclusive financing and not on green financing. And that was when USAID approached us for a proposal to do a green financing in the Indian market. So it was our idea, instead of doing one transaction with a large corporate, let's run the first large program in the Indian market for agri-SMEs and for farmer producer organizations. So at the back end, there was a lot of work that happened in terms of the way we structured the capital between Rabo Foundation. Is the foundation which took the risk as the first loss, and USAID came in as a pari passu guarantee provider, while Rabobank provided the guarantee on behalf of Rabo Foundation. Now, we wanted an entity in India, a financing entity, which understood underwriting of the SME sector very well, which understood the agriculture sector very well. And we were aware that there was very little understanding of green financing or climate financing. But then when we approached Samunnati for the financing program, they put their hands up and they said that they were willing to take the facility on to be able to do green financing. Let me also stress here that there was no financial institutions, large banks in India were not willing to finance because they found the conditions to be very onerous, the reporting conditions to be very, very stringent. So that's why Samunnati put its hands up and said that it was willing to explore with our help and with the help of technical expertise that was there with the USAID mission in New Delhi. Kisa, over to you.
Thank you very much, Arundim. Can we also hear from Anil? What were the circumstances that influenced Samunnati's decision to agree on establishing this partnership with Rabobank? Anil, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Kisa. And again, wonderful to be on this chat. And also good to see Dr. Prasoon, one of the persons who inspire us in the inclusive finance space. So Kisa, I pick up the thread from what Arindom was mentioning. For Samunnati, agriculture is the world. We are an entity that is focused entirely on agriculture and nothing else. And in this financial institution landscape of this country, there are not many entities. I would say at this point in time, perhaps we are the only entity where, as an entity, we don't do anything other than agriculture, both from the financing perspective as well as from the market linkages perspective. And in terms of execution, we are also an entity that is focused on working with farmer collectives as a medium to, to engage with their member farmers for a scaled intervention. And the purpose for which the organization exists is to make markets work for smallholder farmers. That's the reason why we as an organization exist. For Samunnati, and during the initial days, of course, we as an entity are still young. We are less than 6 years old. Rabobank is an epitome of a agri-bank engaged in providing a 360-degree proposition with focus on agriculture. So when Samunnati looked at engaging with Rabobank, whether it is on the FPO guarantee structure or from the dimension of green financing, we looked up to Rabobank as one of the organizations that would help us first understand what is green finance. So you said this session is all about the why and how. I want to bring in the what part also, because at Samunnati, we did not know, well, we are still evolving our understanding of what green finance is, but at that point in time, we had no clue of what green financing is, but we knew that this is something that is important for smallholder farmers. So the choice to work with Rabobank was more as a mentor-mentee kind of an approach where Rabobank can help Samunnati understand what is green finance and integrate that in Samunnati's core proposition as an offering. It's not from the dimension of because there is guarantee available, let us look at lending. You don't jump if there is a safety net. Safety net is only when a unforeseen event happens. But from a core proposition, working with Rabobank gave us an opportunity to understand the what part of the green financing from a scale perspective. I pause here.
Thank you very much, Anil. I remember in one of our discussions, you talked about how Samunnati has been evolved, and you had this very descriptive visual display of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That if you follow that visualization of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it is how the Samunnati as an organization, as an entity, really evolved during the formation of this partnership. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Thank you for alerting me on that. The way we looked at integrating the Maslow's hierarchy of needs to what it needs to be brought in as a proposition to make markets work for smallholder farmers. We know the hierarchy of needs being psychological, safety, the needs of belonging, egocentric, and self-actualization. From a agriculture perspective with a focus on smallholder farmers, the first need is access to finance. And the second need is access to customized finance. And the third need is access to customized finance together with market linkages. The fourth need, the egocentric need, if I may equate that on the framework, is access to customized financial services plus market linkages together with advisory services. How do you produce what needs to be produced? And the self-actualization phase is when you have access to customized financial services with market linkages together with advisory services, with a layer of protection around guarantees as well as the safety nets, the insurance products. When you approach impact for smallholder farmers from a social perspective, you start with the first need, access to finance, where a large number of farmers don't even have access to finance, forget about customized finance. But when you approach from a market-led dimension, our belief is you have to approach from a self-actualization perspective where there needs to be an integrator, there needs to be an entity which brings in all the dimensions of customized finance, market linkages, advisory services, together with safety nets, together with guarantees as well as as well as insurance products. And we at Samunnati look at ourselves as this integrator, as this Zubin Mehta, so to say, to make this symphony happen. And in doing so, we need to learn from the global giants like Rabobank. And that's what I was sharing with you during our preparatory calls, Kisa.
Thanks, Anil. Arindom, as what Anil has described here, it has been an evolution, not pretty much a linear process, perhaps a very complex, chaotic system that evolved over time to really strengthen and reach agreement to effectively deliver this green financing to the agriculture, small and medium enterprises. Perhaps it wasn't a very smooth process, and it will be good to share with the participants what were the challenges, or rather the challenges that created opportunities to learn and grow into these partnerships. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Thanks, Kisa. There are 3 dimensions to that. The first dimension is structuring of the product itself. That was complex because we had USAID, we had a Dutch entity, that's Rabobank, a Dutch bank, a Dutch foundation, that's Rabo Foundation, and we had a private sector financing arm, Samunnati, to be able to firstly do the CDD, the KYC, the due diligence, the legal clearance, all that keeping in view the extent US, European, and Indian regulation by itself is a challenge. That's the first challenge we faced from a legal compliance perspective. That's one. Second was that we overestimated the demand for green financing in India. There was a lot of buzz of a lot of development sector, both international and national, doing a lot of green and environment friendly projects in agriculture. And initially we had the plan to roll out a $75 million program. We had enough capital for that. But when we did a due diligence of the actual demand at the field, it was much, much less, because a lot of these social projects which were being implemented, they were not really bankable. So the bankability of these projects or the business around these projects were not really very well developed. So that's another lesson, to be able to do that kind of a deep stake before we roll out, to understand the circumstances under which, and what kind of demand is there. That's something we did. And it took us a lot of time, and it took a lot of time for us to really understand that the demand was not there of 75 million, and that's why we rolled out our 15 million program. The third was, whenever we talk of a climate product or a landscape product, it frankly becomes too vague, too broad. And one of the lessons we learned was that we need to be able to break it down into more meaningful terms, which becomes more understandable by all the partners, either the borrower or the financing institution or the stakeholders, external stakeholders. And I'll come to that later. But that was one big understanding, that otherwise it becomes just too complex to understand what qualifies and what not. That's extremely, extremely important. Last lesson is something that Anil alluded to, that it's not only a guarantee, but the transfer of knowledge needs to be done very, very efficiently. So there is a lot of capacity building which needs to be done along with the financial structuring, which is key for success of such a program. Kisa.
Thank you very much. Anil, as Arindom has spoken about these complexities, and given your experience within the space of agricultural small and medium enterprises, I believe there is a kind of a transition that has to happen. The transition from when you are structuring the deal to the transition where now the farmers have to also adapt to different methodologies, different practices, so that it can confirm or it can be in alignment with what are the conditions of this, or the specificities within that green financing investment has been structured, or the deal has been structured. And one of the risks that you see, if you are to focus on the end users who are the farmers, has been the shift or the transition of the farmers themselves, in the sense that that transition doesn't happen overnight. it transitions over seasons of farming or agriculture. How did you see the challenges within this transition, either from the concept itself, understanding it, and also applying it to the beneficiaries of these small and medium enterprises financing? What were the challenges and the specific conditions that really influenced you to say, okay, let me continue engaging in this partnership? Anil?
Yeah, Kisa. This has been a journey. I must admit that this has been a journey in terms of moving from understanding what the requirements are to actually looking at implementing it. I would split this into two dimensions, Kisa. Dimension number one is from Samunnati's perspective, and dimension number two is from the smallholder farmer perspective. The first challenge for Samunnati is how much of understanding did we have of green financing to begin with? Because we did not start as an entity which wants to provide green finance. We started as an entity where we said we will focus only on playing the role of a lending entity providing customized financial solutions. That's where our journey began. So when looking at green financing, there are two dimensions: awareness and adaptability. This awareness at an organization level as Samunnati, same awareness and adaptability at a farmer level. So let me come to that later. First and foremost, the challenge for us internally was to understand what qualifies green finance, because we were doing finance from an agriculture perspective. Green finance is a specific layer that comes in the overall scheme of agriculture, and understanding this partnership helped us bring in that lens to look at, of the many things that we do, what qualifies green finance and what kind of assets qualify green finance and why at an organization level. And that awareness helped the product team, helped the execution team on the ground while talking to our FPOs and smallholder farmers, bring in the dimension of scratching the surface a little bit and asking them some questions around why are they doing what they are doing, or why are they not doing what they should be doing. For example, why are they going ahead with paddy for 2 seasons? Because they have water? Do they know that cultivating paddy is also not very efficient from a climate perspective? Or why are they not going for crops that can increase the green cover? We started scratching the surface, and that happened because we had a lens to engage with our farmers from that dimension. The moment we looked at smallholder farmer, we realized that while there is a little bit of awareness on the part of the smallholder farmers on indiscriminate use of both resources as well as chemicals, they did not have the choice to make a transition from a more responsible agriculture, because the choice that they had to make is food on the table for the family today to preserving the land for future generations. The choice was obvious. So it made us realize that if we have to influence this change in the pattern, change in the behavior, there needs to be a role that we need to play to take that adaptability happen without an impact on the income levels of the farmers. And that is where a guarantee structure came in, because here is where we can say, hey, you go ahead and make this transition, what you were mentioning. And if for any reason during this transition things don't work out as expected, you are not vulnerable, because they are vulnerable. You would not be put to loss. There is something that we will absorb so that economically it will not impact you, and it could be debilitating for that. So this awareness and adaptability on the farmer side succeeded, or rather the awareness and adaptability on the provider side, on the entity side, preceded we going and engaging with the clients. Last point, I must admit that we were pleasantly surprised that many of the farmers appreciated the need to make the transition, accepting that they also expressed their helplessness to be able to do the transition, which I understood during my several interactions with other markets and other countries as well, that the conundrum is similar in other smallholder farmer markets as well, that there is awareness, but you need a catalyst to make the transition. Kisa.
How easy or complex was that, Anil? Because here what we are seeing is the shift of the mindset, right? So how easy was it on the side of the farmers?
It was not easy. It was complex, because here we are assuring protection of their incomes, which is not tangible unless it happens. So working with a few early adopters and showcasing some of those models is what helps in bringing in the confidence that, you know, this entity means what they are saying, and there will have to be a small group of early adopters that we need to work with, and they would influence the decisions of others. Not easy, and it has been a journey. It is still small.
Yes, so I think those low-hanging fruits, what you have described as early adopters, are very critical to give confidence to the entire market. If I come back to you, Arindom, you have mentioned the USAID as playing this catalytic role in providing the guarantee. Can you speak a little bit more about their critical role to ensure actually this partnership between Rabobank and Samunnati is effective? Arindom?
Yeah. So, one of the things that happened is after the launch of this program, as I mentioned, it was the first such landscape financing program in India. There's been a lot of buzz. There's been a lot of buzz on both sides. That's on the provider of capital and different kinds of capital, which has different risk appetite, whether they are, kind of development sector, charity money, which can take very high risk, or organizations like IFAD, DFC, IFC, and others who have moderate appetite on one side. And second is among financial institutions in India who have lesser capital appetite, more commercial in nature, but the ambition, because of pressure from the investors, because of their internal mission to go more green in their financing and in the business that they do. So this partnership was very, very useful from that perspective of positioning a green financing program in India, and that too being carried out pretty successfully in terms of the number of projects which have been generated under the program. Second is, and I will mention that later, it's led to far larger programs with more complex partnerships among global players, which was based on the success and the learnings that we got from this early stage financing program. Kisa.
Thanks, Arindom. And you mentioned, you have specifically said that pressure to go green. Who was putting that pressure and why?
Well, I would say there is a little bit of global divide. For Asia, it's very important, and the mandate right now for the regulators, for the central bank, is inclusive financing, social financing. And that's obvious. It's because of the number of poor people we have, both in urban and rural, and the number of smallholder farmers which dot the Asian agricultural landscape. But Europe is going dark green. I guess the inclusive story in Europe is done and dusted, so they are going extremely green. So there's pressure from the investors, there's pressure from internet stakeholders, there's pressure from the customers, there's pressure from the external stakeholders, and more importantly, the pressure is coming from the regulators now. That the regulators are getting extremely demanding in terms of transparency, in terms of the sustainability and climate risk that different financial institutions are carrying on the books, and through that, the clients who are getting finance, it's not only the client, but the entire supply chain as to what kind of carbon footprints is the current business leading to, and what steps are being taken to make businesses more sustainable. So there is pressure coming from all sides. And lastly, it's the general awareness of the public at large that regarding, climate change impacts, which are happening in their daily life, whether weather issues, floods, etc., or wildfires right now, which is happening in many parts of the world, that it's becoming more tangible, visible, and impactful for our normal life. So the awareness is increasing among the public in general.
Anil, over to you now. With regards to the role of USD in that transaction, how catalytic was it in making Samunnati really convinced that green financing is the way to go? Anil?
Yeah. So Kisa, there were two components of this program. Now, the first component of the program from Samunnati's perspective, from our side, is how well did we understand what is green financing and what qualifies green financing. And to make that happen in terms of create a good understanding of what green financing is, both Rabobank and USAID teams spent significant time with the teams at Samunnati in making us understand what is green finance and the nature of assets and qualifying criteria, to an extent where there were 2 full-day workshops for the entire team of Samunnati by both USAID team as well as the Rabobank team, by taking examples of the type of, they had about 273 entities that formed what could be qualifying activities under green financing, and they spent significant time. And before we took on the responsibility of being a partner in the guarantee program, they also made us realize and understand the obligations that we are taking up on ourselves while signing up the guarantee, to an extent where while signing the papers, I mentioned to the people, the audience who were there, a small group that came together, saying it's only in one relationship where all the caveats and all the disclosures and all the expectations get set before you embark on that journey, which is a marriage, right? That's what I said. It feels like as if we are getting into a life of living together rather than a transactional in nature. So for us, it entailed that we are entering this partnership with eyes wide open, because this concept is new. You asked Arindom about what was the pressure for green assets. The way we look at it, Kisa, is for Samunnati, green financing provides an opportunity to bring in the competitive advantage to provide a last mile benefit to the smallholder farmer if an organization like Samunnati understands what is green financing. For 2-3 reasons. Reason number one, there are large pools of capital allocated for specific categories under green financing, and all these pools of capital require a last mile deployment, a last mile connection. Number one, right? Okay, so Arindom says he's muted and video off and he cannot change. Can someone help him? Maybe the host can unmute and
let us look into it.
Yeah. Okay. So I continue with that, Michael, as you are looking at bringing Arindom back.
Yes.
Okay. So the idea is, if we are able to gain expertise and understanding of how to bring in this last mile access to these pools of capital, it entails Samunnati to build that muscle, to be able to provide the disclosures, the traceability, the kind of programs, and going forward, perhaps, there are other dimensions of green financing which would become relevant, to an extent where we last month gave or issued a NCD, a green bond for one of the DFIs. That would not have happened but for the understanding that we gained by working together on the green financing partnership. We have done close to $1 billion of throughput so far, and 10% of that, about $100 million, is what qualifies green financing, is what we understood later after we brought in the filter to understand what green financing is. So that's the competitive advantage that we can bring into the small and marginal farmer by building the muscle, and hence it's a good pressure to have, Kisa.
Thank you, Anil. I would like to stop here so that I can open a Q&A session. So while we are waiting for participants to think through, I will take the first question from the chat. Could you give a bit more information about the climate finance product that you are offering to a smallholder farmer? Perhaps it is how did you structure that deal to ensure that these financial investments are flowing from the originator all the way to the smallholder farmer? Arindom, can you take that question?
Well, I think it'll be better for Anil to take that question because the origination is being done by Samunnati. We do not interfere that, but Samunnati comes to us or the USAID mission in New Delhi for clarifications when they see whether any origination which is done qualifies under the guarantee or not. But the actual origination is done by Samunnati, not by us.
Right. Yeah.
Anil, over to you.
Yeah, I guess the question is to understand about the program. We
Yes.
are talking about the green program. So the question is about the program. So let me attempt. The program is actually a guarantee program setting aside a corpus of, I'm just taking as an example to explain the model. Say it is $5 million worth program, and specific criterion and profile of what kind of assets get qualified under the program are mentioned in that. A specific term sheet is issued saying, hey, if you follow 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and your assets qualify, is when this guarantee program would be applicable. And for those assets where the guarantee program is applicable or qualifying assets, should there be a default, part of that loss will be taken up by the guarantee pool. The other part will still remain with the lender who is participating in that program. And hence the incentives get aligned for the lender that I am not lending because there is a guarantee available. I am lending because it is part of what as an organization I do in our engagement with the smallholder farmer. But what it does for the provider of the guarantee is it leverages, it multiplies the amount deployed, because on my own, Samunnati could have looked at a smaller corpus. Now that there is a guarantee program, now that there is an organization and a set of organizations which are hand-holding in technical assistance as well as in such programs, our ability to multiply the size of the program got catalyzed. And hence, instead of 10, we could actually look at 100, because we know that 10 on our own we could have anyhow done. The 90 additional has happened because there is a safety net, not only for the loss, but also on hand-holding us in terms of qualifying assets, hand-holding us on technical assistance, as well as building the muscle that I mentioned earlier. All were part of the program. And as per the guarantee program, a couple of entities were taken up, right? A couple of entities were, 3 entities were given the option. 1 entity dropped off, the other 2 entities were taken through the training program, and then we signed up for the program. Not that we have claimed any amount so far, but what it also led to is now we have a dedicated team of about 7 people in Samunnati focusing entirely on agriculture. Dedicated pools of debt capital that we have set aside, which are not commercially priced, because we know if we generate those assets at some point in time, we can access cheaper pools of capital that are earmarked for green assets, so on and so forth. That's in a, well, I would not say in a nutshell, because I did elaborate a little bit more, in a gist what the program is, Kisa.
Thanks, Anil. There is another follow-up question to your response, asking how the smallholder farmer benefits as that what you have called the last mile.
Right.
How does a smallholder farmer benefit from that transaction? Anil?
Short term, medium term, long term. Short term, the smallholder farmers' cost of borrowing has the potential to come down because the cost of borrowing for green assets could be at a preferred rate than so-called non-green assets. And we are seeing it in our portfolio already that the pricing for our wholesale borrowing, if there is a green asset, comes down significantly. Second, in the medium term, access to capital could become much more easier, much more enabling. Going back to my hierarchy of needs, the second leg, access to customized financial products, where we say, hey, instead of going for 2 cycles of paddy, if you actually go for 1 cycle of paddy and 1 cycle of millets, we would be able to give you preferred financing for that. Would you want to take that? Medium term. Now, the long term is where the farmers can preserve their land as well as get a higher yield because there is an increased awareness, especially post-pandemic, by the consumers on not only what they are eating, but also where it is produced and how it is produced. And creating that awareness in the long term would bring in the dimension of better realization for the same produce by the smallholder farmer for the same small holding, which is less than a hectare in the Indian context. The non-tangible benefit would be preserving the vitality of the soil over a period, which would at some point in time bring down the cost of cultivation, because now you are not pumping the chemicals which cost.
Thanks, Anil. And I think experience also shows that the risk-return margins are pretty good, especially on the return side. And I think when we are looking at the last mile where the smallholder farmers are, it is how you manage that risk. And most of the time, structuring these deals through the partnership can give an opportunity to de-risk pretty much on the last mile side. Another question from the chat is for you, Arindom. Rabobank, perhaps its footprint is in India, and it seems we have a lot of participants from Nepal. How can Nepal and neighboring countries to India benefit from such kind of partnerships? Can you share your experience? Over to you, Arindom.
Yeah, thanks. Well, Kisa, I would say to our friends from Nepal, yes, Nepal is very similar to India, but Nepal is in an ecologically very, very sensitive zone. So, I mean, the climate impact on Nepal could be very, very big if, the right kind of financing and agriculture practices are not in place. Unfortunately, we do not have a presence in Nepal, either on the commercial side or on the development side, but there are multiple development sector players, multilaterals, which are working in Nepal. I think for any stakeholder in Nepal, it will be very, very good to reach out to the international development sector players, both for knowledge and for access to finance and for similar kind of structures to be able to do green or climate smart financing in Nepal.
Thanks, Arindom. There is another question here coming from a participant about the risk of greenwashing in your operations. How do you mitigate those risks in your operations down to the implementation, partnership, and the entire value chain? The risk of greenwashing. Do you want to take this, Arindom?
Yeah, so that's a serious concern. Greenwashing is a serious concern for the trillions of dollars which have been made available for, sustainable financing. Now, it's very, very important, firstly, to be able to find the right kind of partners. Second is to have a very, very robust reporting mechanism. Third is also to be able to provide external technical assistance. Just to give you an example, with Samunnati and 2 other partners, we are launching another green financing program on the 23rd of September. This is a larger program, a $55 million program, where we are trying to address the issue of food loss and financing, renewable and clean tech energy at the farm level. Now, this is being fronted by DFC, another wonderful, complex partnership we have stitched up. Now, in this particular case, just to address this issue of greenwashing, what we have done is we are hiring external consultants. This is the best in class, impact assessment consultants who will work with both the borrowers and the lenders to be able to come with a common methodology on, on reporting of food loss or carbon emission. So we are very cognizant of the sense that there should not be any greenwashing. And that's why we work with our partners and external consultants to ensure that any financing that happens is actual green financing. And the second risk, that if any partner believes that it can originate assets which are not green in color, but if there is a loss, then it will go through our scrutiny and the scrutiny of our partners like USAID or DFC. And that call, the guarantee call, may get rejected because the end use was not green. So financial institutions fronting the transaction, their credit committees are extremely cognizant of the fact that if it doesn't fit into the mandate of the guarantee, then a guarantee call may not be honored by the guarantors for the right reason.
You mentioned food losses, Arindom, and that reminds me about efficiency. There is this concept called the frugal innovation, in that you have little resources, but with little resources, you are really stretching yourself to bring innovations. And India has been excellent at that. This leads me to the question from the chat that is talking about the need for certification, like for organic products. And this might increase the cost for farmers. So that is still in line with the green financing, where you have to meet certain criteria for your product to be certified, for it to gain premier place within the market. How can you talk about the increase of cost of the farmers through such innovations when it comes to issues like certification? Anil?
So, Kisa, one of the movements that we are witnessing in the Indian landscape is the focus on farmer collectives, the FPOs, the farmer producer organizations. While you cannot aggregate the land, because the reality is the culture is of fragmented land holdings and getting fragmented by generations, the only way to aggregate is through collectivization. And the principle of cooperation is not new to India. But then what we are enthused about is the focus on farmer producer organizations at a policy level, at a market level, as well as at a deployment level. Now, these FPOs can actually bring in the dimension of one, batch processing, because now you are looking at engaging with a 500 farmers, 1,000 farmers, not one farmer having 500 hectares or 1,000 hectares, and within a small vicinity where geoclimatic zones are similar. So the certification, you also have the producer's guarantee kind of approach, where you know that the producer is giving a guarantee that this is all what I have used. While a certification is an external validation of what is happening, at some point in time, we may also actually look at farmer producer organizations playing the role of an integrator, where a package of practices together with specific inputs are given to the farmers to make sure that the residues and the practices are compliant with what needs to be done, and buy back the produce. As long as the economic incentives of smallholder farmers are aligned, this batch processing can bring down the cost of certification, while there is a cost for deploying this. we also see a lot of soft money and grant money being allocated for such technical assistance as well as for the capacity building of these farmer producer organizations. The last point is we also see a huge buoyancy in the agri startup and entrepreneurship. And we are seeing few technology driven companies which are looking at the traceability as well as the quality testing at the farm gate, which we think can accentuate the need to get certification fairly easier than being more onerous and hence more expensive. These are all the expectations to bring down. But I also saw a question in the chat box, how do you align the incentives? As long as you align the incentive of the farmer to make that extra dollar, nothing will work. We need to certainly put more money in her hands so that the incentives get aligned.
I'll just add one point to what Anil said, just to stress that collectivization or the aggregation of farmers, either physical through producer organizations or virtual through technology, is a must to be able to address the climate issue, because it's very complex, it's expensive, and the transaction cost or the risk of being able to change practices at the farm level is simply too high. We don't have enough resources to do it. So use of technology and physical collectivization is a must. Without that, any region which has smallholder farmers who dominate the agricultural landscape will not be able to address the climate risk issue. It's just too expensive, because we have also to get in multiple partnership. Finance is just one part. Universities, research organizations, NGOs. So weaving them all together is a very, very expensive affair. So we need technology to be able to do that in an efficient manner.
Excellent, Arindom. Talking of technology, there is a concept that they normally say fail fast solutions in technology, where you fail fast, you actually learn, regroup again, and then learn from the challenges. Can you quickly say, what are the key lessons you learned that you can share with the participants today? Arindom?
Yeah, so I will just repeat what I said, because whenever any market player is dealing with smallholder farmers, whether it's for inputs, advisory, markets, infrastructure, financing, or now climate solutions, the transaction costs are simply too high. And the risk of doing business with smallholder farmers is too high. It's because of information asymmetry, because of the extreme fragmentation in the upstream part of the value chain. That's where technology, digital technology is what I'm speaking of, can kick in efficiencies. And we are seeing some wonderful examples of digital technology companies in India. I think there will be the global leaders in years to come up with very cost-effective solutions to be able to weave in multiple players on a single platform and incentivizing all players to work together, keeping the smallholder farmer in the center of things. So that started happening in an efficient manner. And the good part is this technology is not asking for grants or support. All this is being backed by private capital who are looking at scale. Without scale, they are not going to invest. And second is, because of technology, the best in class human resources are getting attracted into the sector.
We are still going to the importance of partnerships, which are really promoting economies of scale. Anil, what are the key challenges or opportunities quickly that you see participants can take forward based on your experience? What are your learnings that you can share?
I only see opportunities, Kisa. There are no challenges. And agriculture in India couldn't have asked for a better moment to do meaningful work with the farmer at the center. So we at Samunnati believe in an ecosystem approach where Samunnati does ABC activities, but there are very many entities, both upstream and downstream, which can bring in complementary skills to be able to do meaningful work. at Samunnati, we also have a platform for startups in agriculture called Samaramb, where we provide them 3 categories of service. One, we provide them the startup debt or the venture debt, which is critical for their existence. 2, we also provide access to the farmer producer organizations that we work with for their proof of concept or for their scale. And the third dimension is we also provide them the complementarity in terms of the offering. What we have realized from the Indian smallholder farmers' behavior is any service where there is no tangible cash incentive for new adoption, they will not pay cash for that service. Clear, right? They are ready to pay 150 rupees for artificial insemination because there is a calf at the end of that cycle and the cow gives milk, rather than paying 150 rupees for artificial intelligence. Both are AIs, but this AI puts more money in the hand. The other AI, I don't know what happens with artificial intelligence. So entities that are looking at monetizing using technology without intangible benefit to the farmer will find it difficult, and hence a collaborative approach where we build the tangible benefit and then charge the service are our beliefs in terms of an ecosystem approach. Collaboration is the key. We need to come together with farmer at the center. I repeat Arindom's point, farmer at the center.
I totally agree, Anil. Partnership is the way to go. What's next? This partnership is really giving us hope. The engagement I've had really indicates that the way to go to finance green investments is really through solid partnerships, and you are really at the forefront of setting the stage. What's next for Rabobank?
Well,
what's next for Samunnati?
Yeah, so I mean, just picking on the partnership with Samunnati as an example, as I mentioned, that we are growing the partnership, making it more complex in terms of the offering, getting into greener projects. As I mentioned, we'll be launching a $55 million program on the 23rd of September. In November, if all goes well, it's even a larger program for regenerative agriculture and circular use in agriculture, which is extremely challenging to finance. And Samunnati has put its hands up again and said that they are willing to front. And while there are more financing institutions who are fronting the transaction, the major allocation is going to Samunnati. But there are other partners who are coming in on both sides. One is they are providing capital, different shades of capital, different risk-bearing capital, who's doing the work behind. But financial institutions who are willing to front the transaction so that they can provide local currency resources, financial resources to the farmers, farmer organizations, and agri-SMEs. That pool of institutions is also growing once they see that such partnerships work. So it works on both sides.
Yes. What's next for Samunnati, Anil? You have been weaving through your conversation through this thread about hopefulness and opportunity. And I think you are resilient now, given that experience. So what's next? How do you want to take Samunnati forward?
From a scale perspective, Kisa, we would certainly look at the green assets to be, now it is at 10%, maybe take it to 30% to 50%, over the next few years, maybe 3-4 years. But where we see much more opportunity is by showcasing the quality of these assets and their resilience. Can we bring in other lenders to also put the green lens? Because Samunnati's story is not about what Samunnati does on its balance sheet. Samunnati's story is about making agriculture a credit-worthy proposition. That's how our journey started in 2014. How can we bring the green dimension, and picking up you from Arindom, from green to dark green is where Samunnati can look at, but from no green dimension to a green dimension with our lenders. So can we partner with large banks and say that, hey, we can be your front-end entity. You don't need to build the muscle and go through the entire steep learning curve as an entity. Samunnati would be able to generate the green compliant assets for you, and then you can deploy them in the market. So can we grow non-linearly by bringing in other players also, but not expect them to go through the entire learning curve and inspire more entities to take up this? That would be our aspiration.
Thank you very much. The IPCC has just shared the very concerning figures on where the world is going with regards to climate change. And within the agricultural small and medium enterprises, partnership will be very key as we go forward in terms of how do we address the issues of climate change within the space of agriculture, be it within landscapes or be it within technology like renewable energy that will really reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. With that, I would really want to thank our prominent players in this fireside chat. It has been such a pleasure engaging with you, Rabobank, Arindom, as well as Anil, Samunnati. I've personally learned a lot, and I hope our engagement will continue. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kisa.
Thank you. Thank you, Kisa, for an excellent job as the moderator. You really made for a very, very interesting discussion with plenty of learning, I think, to go around. I just want to close this by thanking also both of the speakers, Anil, Arindom. Thank you so much for sharing your experience with partnerships. And I just want to let everyone who's still on this call know that we will continue these discussions, particularly around partnerships and the importance of partnerships in green finance for agriculture. And the next session that we will have is going to be within the plenary, the SAFIN plenary, that's going to be held from the 6th to the 7th of October, but this particular session on the 6th of October, 3-hour session, a full workshop where we're really going to get into some specific themes that relate to this particular issue. So please join us then. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And I look forward to keeping in touch with everyone. Thank you again to all the speakers. And a good day to everyone. Good evening. Good morning.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Kisa. And
Goodbye.
thank you, Arindom. Thanks for the opportunity. Bye-bye.